Okay, sounds good. I just started recording, so
Awesome,
we
thank
should be
you.
good to go.
All right, looks like we only have one item on the agenda for today, and that comes from Jacek around cross-network egress gateways. So let me switch over to this tab. Jacek, you want to take us away?
Yes. Can I share my screen, or you want
Sure,
to
yeah,
show?
go for it.
Okay, thanks. Wait a second. Okay, please confirm if you can see.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's start. Okay, this proposal aims to introduce the concept of cross-network egress gateway, or east-west egress gateway, and the goal is preserve best practices for securing the egress traffic when existing users migrate from they scale from single mesh to from single cluster to multiple clusters. And let's assume that users follow the best practices and they block the egress traffic from the cluster and allow only egress gateway to leave the cluster, right? Let's assume that these network policies exist in the cluster, and now when they scale multiple meshes, it turns out that it doesn't work because they allow only the egress gateway to leave the cluster, right? And the goal is to enable traffic, to enable routing cross-network traffic through existing egress gateways to preserve those existing policies. And yeah, here's the diagram of the existing state, of the current state in multi-network configuration. Endpoints, pods, proxies from cluster 1 are aware of local IPs and remote east-west gateway IP. And the expected state is proxies will be aware of local endpoints and local egress gateway, which will route to remote ingress gateway. So the disadvantage of this approach is it adds additional hop in the connection, but the main goal is to improve compliance and security, and optimization of network traffic is not the goal here. Yes, and here is implementation idea. So we might add a label, topology networks, similar to existing topology network. And let's say that when networks label exists on a workload, it's discovered. It's recognized as a cross-network egress gateway, and it's used as a remote endpoint for remote instances. And that gateway will receive the address of remote ingress, and regular workloads will only know the cluster IP of the egress gateway. And I explained on 2 scenarios how it might work. This label would be multi-value label because it can accept multiple networks to reuse egress gateway for multiple networks. For everything, for all networks, or selected, or only for subset, if that would be required for I don't know, some splitting traffic across different egressors. Yeah, and then egress gateway would be configured with out pass-through gateway or pass-through plus virtual service on port 15443, like cross-network ingress, right? Yeah, And what about ambient? It's not designed for ambient because multi-network ambient is in progress, and it doesn't make sense to introduce this kind of concept if this is. I don't think it will be required in ambient mode. So for now, I didn't think about making it work in ambient. Yeah, so this is the short overview of this proposal.
I'm struggling to understand the diagrams a little bit. It looks like you have gateways and pods that are outside of your two clusters.
Sorry, if this envoy configuration is confusing, it belongs to the cluster one. This is the envoy configuration of sleep pod in cluster one. I don't know.
Okay.
I just
okay. So that arrow is not designating traffic flow. That arrow is designating configuration.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for this. I think I'm persuaded by the use case. It makes sense from a regulatory and compliance question, where you want to make sure that your traffic goes through those egress pods, even across cluster. I think I've got two high-level questions / concerns. One is on ambient. I think that this sort of feature, like that behavior at least, we want to be able to reproduce that in ambient. I think that we need to, this is a time where we need to try to make sure ambient and sidecar are aligned and are less confusing and not have too much drift. So that's one part. The other part is the mechanism for the fix or the topology networks perspective, where essentially we're sort of, it seems like, if I understand correctly, you label the egress gateway workload and then with the network, and that network would sort of mean that for traffic going towards that network, that becomes the you have to go through that hop first. I almost feel like a better approach, sort of in line with the ambient idea, is to sort of just make east-west gateways, egress gateways, more first-class thing, where we have code that sort of promotes the idea of an egress gateway, because the idea with for a compliance perspective, you always want traffic to go through that egress gateway, and so it feels like we need that concept, more of that concept in the control plane, rather than treating it just like any other thing. And again, I haven't thought in detail how about that would work, but I guess I'm just nervous about sort of tacking on more semantics to the networks label, and how common and how similar it is to the network label. But again, really agree. I agree with the use case. I think it's a compelling one. Okay,
let me answer the first question. So, yeah, I understand. I understand your that you would expect similar semantics for ambient and sidecar, but because of ambient multi-network introduces dedicated gateway class for east-west gateway, my thought was we don't have feature parity for multi-network mesh, so we don't have to do that for egress as well. That was my way of thinking.
I think yes, when it comes to the specifics of the gateway class, but I think we are certainly aiming for feature parity when it comes to use cases. And so while it might look a little bit different, I think we do want to make sure this use case would be available in ambient in some way, even if the mechanism is slightly different. And I'd go maybe even a step further and say that since we're starting a new thing, we should try to align the experiences as closely as possible, so at least semantically, from a use case perspective, it's familiar to users.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for pointing this out. I didn't ignore it. I didn't ignore this. I just wanted to avoid introducing. I wanted to avoid inventing features, because we don't know multi-network ambient yet. So because if I am not experienced in this area, I didn't have ideas if this is really needed in ambient. I wasn't sure. So that's the main reason. Okay, second question was about network labels, right? Actually, I forgot the details of that questions.
No problem. I'll let John go, and then I can. He might have similar or different feedback, and then I can repeat my comment.
Okay.
If not,
sorry. Go ahead, John.
No problem.
Hey, yeah, my question was just like, why do we need first class? Why do we need changes to Istio to support this? I feel like this is something that you could already do today, because on each cluster you can say this is the IP address or the service or whatever that you reach this network from, and so you can already point it to something local. Like obviously, everyone today is pointing to these remote workloads, but there's no reason that it has to be the remote east-west gateway. Wouldn't that already be sufficient? And then the egress gateway can just be marked as the gateway for that network. And then that gateway can just be configured to route the traffic accordingly.
Look at this. I can deploy egress gateway and apply how to pass through gateway to the egress, mark it with remote network, and it will be used as an address. But if I add ingress gateway in the second cluster and it's discovered, you have now 2 IP addresses of the remote address. Are
we certain there's not a way to specify a specific one? I feel like, there's like a bunch of ways to configure networks, unfortunately, Istio. But I would be shocked if there's not a way to specifically say this is the address and that the discovered one messes with it.
Mesh networks, in theory, allows you to set what they are, but mesh networks are somewhat abandoned. Like I don't think any of the forget ambient for a second. Because my understanding is that mesh networks is pretty much abandoned for all intents and purposes.
Actually, that might work. Is it still supported?
Technically, yes.
Yeah, it hasn't been deprecated, but when we discussed making use of it for ambient multi-cluster, I think the consensus was that it was effectively a dead-end API. It wasn't going to get much more love.
Okay.
Even if you set that, if you've got 2 different addresses in mesh networks, I think if I remember the split horizon logic correctly, it'll balance across the different network gateways,
yes.
And sort of split traffic to what Jacek was saying. So I don't know that you can sort of have one gateway, sorry, maybe more general. You can have one proxy have a network gateway pointing to one address, and then another proxy have a network gateway pointing to a different address. That would solve this, but I don't know that you can do that today.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Thank you guys for these questions. I will think more about this, but I think that I'm correct with my concern about routing across 2 gateways.
Yeah. And I think that has value in the ambient context as well as in the context.
Okay, I will think about how it might work in ambient as well. Thank you for feedback.
Yeah, one thing that might be useful in regards to if we have to like make a way to have the precedence, or maybe we don't actually, there's another use case that's kind of similar where someone wants to expose their egress with just a custom address because they're exposing it through like an external load balancer that's not discovered. So that's a very similar use case to this. So maybe those would be 2 birds with 1 stone kind of. There's just really a general desire to be able to modify how you reach the other network and point to a different address, essentially. And I think this is one specific one, but it's a more broad problem. So, not trying to make your life harder. I'm trying, I think, the easy solution here would also enable other things, which is more compelling.
Per proxy, right, John? So you're wanting each proxy to be able to go to a different.
Well, Like the minimum would be like on the egress gateway, you slap like an annotation or whatever and say, reach me here. If you need a per context aware one, then maybe it's a bit more complicated. I mean, if you put reach me at Istio system or Istio egress.istio system, maybe it would work fine, but you probably want the source cluster to configure it, not the remote cluster.
Right. Yep. Okay.
So we maybe need a way to do that, but
John, could you leave a comment in the proposal? I want to be sure that I understand your suggestion correctly. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Can I ask a quick question? So with this model, that's assuming I think the user experience, if I understood correctly, this is probably the label is probably not going to be used by application developer, right? So it's mostly going to be used by the owner of the gateway who labels the gateway pod with the network topology label. And then under the cover, would we still write service entry when we implement this? Can I think of this as a user experience improvement for gateway owners so that they or the application developer doesn't have to manually write service entry or associated resource to make sure the traffic goes to the particular egress gateway first before it routes out?
My assumption was it's for single mesh multi-cluster, and I assume that service entries are not used manually by application developers. They connect to a service which may exist locally or remotely. And the goal was to fill endpoints properly. Yes, and the egress gateway is fully managed by mesh administrator. So the topology is configured by mesh admin, and application developers doesn't know if the egress gateway exists or not. I assume that they shouldn't be aware of the topology. They connect to a service. They don't know where it exists, locally or remotely. It just goes through the egress gateway to meet compliance expectations.
No,
the load balancing decision is still made client side, just like always. It's just if it's chosen a remote endpoint, it's going to traverse the egress gateway.
Yes, exactly.
No, I have another question regarding this. Well, in your example, you as an admin can say, hey, every cross cluster traffic in this example from cluster 1 to cluster 2, I want to hop through the egress gateway. By enforcing that, you can through the label you were proposing, right? The topology label. Now, if you think about another example, maybe I have multi-cluster. I don't necessarily want in-cluster, cross-cluster traffic goes through egress because it's more trusted, but I do want the traffic maybe goes to Amazon Web Service or some particular S3 storage on Amazon. I want to hop through egress. Now, in your example, how do we enable anything? Do we change anything regarding the second scenario, or does the second scenario still require user go through like service entry, like what they do today manually, and the label and the topology label you are proposing is only applicable for cross-cluster traffic within a single mesh?
It's a good question. Yeah, my assumption was it's for single mesh multi-cluster. If it comes to making exceptions for accessing, as you said, S3 or anything else in Amazon what you trust more, yeah, I think how it might be done. Maybe another service entry with another network, but the general assumption is network policies for egress exist anyway. So I assume that it's designed for cases where mesh administrator fully control the egress traffic, right? So if someone wants to Actually, I didn't think about skipping the egress gateway because it's not desired in my use case.
Right, but it is a desire in some of the use case because it's an actual hub, right? If I can somewhat trust the other cluster, I don't necessarily need to go through egress.
It's a good question. I don't have an answer at the moment. I will think about this more, okay?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I'm curious on the semantics for the user when they access external traffic. S3, for instance, was external traffic on a different cluster in the mesh.
Okay, then service entry for that S3 must exist with proper network. And if egress gateway for that network exists, it should be routed through that egress. But if it's not, if it's mesh external service, it must be configured by mesh admin on that egress. I mean, mesh administrator must supply pass-through gateway with virtual service to route it.
Right, so we're not changing any of that today for accessing external service.
Once again, I assume that this approach is designed for those users who already route everything through the egress. So it shouldn't be a problem for those users, right? And I don't know if other users, if someone, those users who skip egress for some cases or always, they simply don't need it, in my understanding. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't understand the use case, but yeah, this is my understanding. Sorry if I didn't answer what you expected.
No, I'm thinking loud here too. I think I got it. Your proposal is specifically limited to cross-cluster traffic. You're not proposing any changes to how from sleep or HTTP being to interact with the external service through egress.
No.
So that remain today. Now, your proposal assumes everybody wants to use the egress gateway, whether it's all in or not using it at all. So there is not a simple way to bypass in some cases. Is
yes,
that true?
The point is to block bypassing the egress.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And if I don't want to use the egress gateway for cross traffic, I just don't label that topology.
Yeah, you don't use topology networks. You use topology network as always.
Constant.
Yeah.
So I personally think it's a good idea in general to have a policy that says that no pod in the cluster is allowed. I mean, and there already kind of network policy can do that to prevent access to anything that is not authorized. So both internet access and access to other cluster is restricted by policy. So, and a lot of people want to have this in place. So it's very useful to have a mechanism to control how do you reach with some policies in place, because that's the purpose of the egress gateway is to, you say this particular workload is allowed or is not allowed to talk with another workload, and you have border protection basically. The question is basically how easy can you make it? Basically, I mean, if it can be super easy, just automatic control plane detects everything and programs. I mean, I say I want controls, then I don't have to configure anything else. Basically, that's one thing that would be very useful. And the other extreme is if people want to have fine-grained control, as Lynn was saying. I mean, if I want this pod to be able to connect to the internet or to have direct access, this pod may need to have to use stateful sets, because that's where pretty much all our gateways break when we discuss multi-cluster, multi-network. That's a different topic, and if it's based on Z tunnel, again, there are some ways to pass original address and to have those control in place. It would be good to have simple stories for both extremes, basically. I mean, how can you do this super easy? How can you do it with super fine control and feature?
Okay, I can give you an answer. I defined a requirement that that cross-network egress gateway is expected to have port 15443, similarly as east-west gateway. And mesh administrator can apply auto pass-through gateway to make it super easy, or can apply pass-through gateway to that port with virtual service and manually defined routes. And this approach allows to preserve existing routing defined for port 443, which is designed for, which will be mostly used for external traffic to the internet.
I see. That's very reasonable. So that seems simple enough. We may want to have another option to differentiate between the two ports. I mean, I understand why you choose the same port. And perhaps for the simple case, it's the best choice, but for the advanced case where you may want to have some differentiation, maybe one, two, but that would be relatively easy to tweak. Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Awesome, thanks.
The other comment I have is we may want to resync the name, the label, because I do think the label topology.istio.io/network, using that as an enforcement, I think this label already been used and reserved in Istio to indicate the network. So how would you, like, the semantics of the label already exists and now we're just changing the meaning of it? I don't know how well that works. It might break people.
I suggested the label networks.
Was always S at the end?
Yeah, existing is network.
Gotcha. That's very confusing.
That will be super confusing. Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought it was the same, and I know Steven implemented that the /network. So, okay.
Maybe use egress /egress or something like that. We still want to have the network in place because that's super important for defining the network boundaries, basically. But
oh yes, we don't want to change what we support today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, naming is different. Is difficult thing. So yeah, it might be egress networks. I don't know. Naming is up to discussion. But I just wanted to present the general idea and semantics. Naming is doesn't matter.
Bike shading is where we spend most of our times and lives. The other things that you may consider is this an Istio specific declaration where you specify where those egress gateway cross would specific to Istio, or is it something where you can take an existing egress gateway, Squid or whatever enterprise egress gateways exist already in the world, and we treat it as an integration that is kind of generic. I mean, it's a feature of the egress gateways that define a label, which is not Istio specific, and perhaps other meshes, other core Kubernetes or other things may take the same approach and use kind of a common label. I saw customers using dedicated egress gateway with all kind of fancy features on top. I mean, ours is very simple; it's just routing, but there are all kind of things that are policies and antivirus and regulatory stuff. So it may be very useful if we can combine this and provide a way for workloads to go to this kind of external egress gateway, which may have its own dedicated port, and think of it as kind of as a bigger problem than just making it work with Istio. That's that kind of my.
Okay, thanks. Actually, I don't have experience with other gateways except Squid, but okay, I will think about this.
Squid is a good start. Squid is a good start. If you can make it with Squid, probably it will work with almost all of them.
But do you assume that this kind of enterprise egress gateway is deployed in Kubernetes?
It might be, it might not be. In some cases, it's not. It may be in a different Kubernetes cluster altogether to keep it under a different control domains. But it has to be in the same network, same VPC. But you can start simple. I mean, assume that Squid is deployed or that is deployed in Kubernetes, and then we can figure out how to deal with if it's an external IP.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Jacek, do you feel like you have what you need for next steps here?
Yes. Thank you everyone for feedback and questions. I will think more and will come with answers, especially for ambient and others. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a great proposal. Next up, we have Daniel on default network policy. Daniel, are you here? Doesn't look like he is.
He said he had to drop at the half-hour mark.
I see. And so I'll share out real quickly and just give a brief overview of what I've seen here. The word default is a little bit concerning, but I don't think overall that the idea is concerning. I think he's proposing baseline network policy for securing Istio. So if you're using Istio with a standard CNI that implements network policy, we could publish a baseline set of network policies that lock down the various Istio services in an ideal way. I don't think it's talking about network policy for other applications. It's just for the Istio control plane, as far as I can tell. I don't know if it makes sense to have extended discussion on this without Daniel present, or do we want this to be like an FYI?
Is it literally baseline network policy, or it's network? Like, is it the SIG network API network policy or the regular network policy? Oh, I see that.
I don't know what the difference between those two things is. Sorry.
Okay. No, I see this now.
Yeah, maybe move to next week because I saw a couple of other things on the agenda.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll get that moved out in a minute because I have the next agenda item. I just wanted to kick off some discussion on this. I saw a really cool demo about a month ago of using context files for Copilot's agent mode. Basically, it's instructions to help Copilot understand a code base and be able to handle tasks and provide useful feedback. So I have a branch published that has some Copilot context files set up, as well as a meta context file that helps you build more context files. Some of the context files are probably not accurate because it is AI generated. And so, of course, it's prone to hallucination like anything else. But I did want to give just a very brief show off what I've got here. Let's see, I want to move to a window. You know what, I'm going to go with an entire screen. Screen 2, share. Now, you're able to see my screen?
Yes.
So I was able to, we've had a recent failure in integration tests on that's kind of strange around cleanup, where sometimes cleanup is failing. So I went ahead and
Was that me or Mitch?
It's
I think it's Mitch.
Yeah.
Okay.
probably this context file weighs a lot.
Mitch, you're muted, but you're back.
Mitch, would this context file crash our computer as well?
We can't hear you if you're talking, Mitch. I don't know if you can hear us.
Is he still in the
Okay.
call? Did he drop?
No, he was in the call. He was in the call. He said we should go on without him.
He said at the beginning of the meeting that he might have technical problems.
Oh, that's right. You did say no problem. Okay, so should we move to the next topic, Keith?
Yes, let me go ahead and share my screen just so we can follow along. Make sure this works. Okay, I'll zoom in a bit. Okay. So this was a somewhat low priority one, but there's no other topic on the agenda, so I guess we'll just go into it. We've been testing, Steven's on my team specifically, has been testing some multi-cluster ambience, and we came across a data race in like sort of the core of KRT. I guess it's just all the different collections we're creating for multiple clusters, sort of stress tested it. And from what we can tell, actually, this is a different one. Yeah, this is metadata. There's, no, actually, it's the same one. So it looks like in KRT, we use a set, and we do an insert contains check for adding dependencies. And it looks like when you call insert contains at the same time, you have potential for a race. And so if Stephen Landau or John is on, I think you're both on the call, just quickly want to know if there's a reason why we didn't see any locking on the dependency tracker for KRT, or if there's something we're doing wrong, or
No, I think it's just a bug.
this.
I suspect the reason why it's showing up now and not before is usually the dependencies are like done once early on for most collections. Whereas probably with the multi-cluster one, it's a bit more dynamic in nature. I literally looked at this code. I mean, this was now. I probably wrote the bug before this, but I've been working in Rust lately, and I was looking and I was like, that's impossible. Like, how can we access this data now with the Mutex? But no, it's just Go. So I think it's probably pretty simple. We probably just slap it under the Mutex, and it's probably all fine. I would imagine, but we'd have to double check, obviously, what the whole call stacks of the various things calling it.
Sure. Okay, that's really helpful. Appreciate it. Yeah, the main goal of bringing this up here is just to make sure that we weren't misusing KRT or like breaking some assumptions, which we might still be doing. But good to know that there wasn't. Just wanted to confirm that there wasn't like a reason why we didn't expect to need a mutex here. So that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, Stephen Jinwan, if you're on the call, do you have anything else you wanted to ask or add here?
No, I ran. It shows up very rarely. I will say it's like you have to run it like 80,000 times to get a few occurrences, but it seems to happen a lot in the CI, like 3 and 4 times.
Yeah, we're at the stage in the multi-cluster test that we're preparing to ship this in alpha in 127. We're hitting the point where the trace down flags are running tests tens of thousands of times to try to produce it. So yeah, it's been a fun couple of weeks. Fun is definitely in quotation marks. Okay, appreciate it, everyone. I guess we can go on to the next topic. And it's just a quick announcement. Feature freeze is scheduled for a week from tomorrow, July 17th. Branch has already been cut due to some logistical just logistics from the release managers. So that means if you have a PR that is merging, or you're wanting to add a PR, and you're wanting it to go out in 127, please make sure that you add the cherry pick label. Similarly, if you're reviewing a PR from a non-Istio member, someone not a part of the Istio org, you have to go a step further and comment with the cherry pick command, because the cherry pick label won't automatically work for people who aren't in Istio org. So just throwing this out there as a PSA, 1, for future freeze coming up. So get your features in, your big features in before then. Because anything after that will require TSC approval. And then 2, from a logistics perspective with the branch cuts, got to make sure we have cherry picks for PRs that we're expecting to be in 127. Any comments or questions on that? All right, cool. It looks like Mitch has a comment in the chat. Adding the few markdown files he linked helps Copilot give much better useful answers and write better code. Is this something that'd be more useful to than just him? So TLDR, you can add context files for Copilot so that it can write better code. Do we feel like this is something that we would like generally? Anybody have strong thoughts on that?
Is there a way to do it where people who don't want to use Copilot and they instead want to use Claude or Cursor, one of the other several things? I'm pretty sure they all like the names of these files to be their own. And so
Yes.
we should endorse one in particular.
Yeah, that's a great question. Can you guys hear me this time?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. So as far as the file's format is concerned, it's just Markdown. It should be readable by any LLM. Shouldn't be a problem there. Location might vary, although it depends on what you mean by using Claude. Like the
No, I mean,
example
like they
that I
all
failed.
like want them to be named like something different, like Claude.md or Cursor.md or Copilot.md. They look for those specific names, and that's like a small issue, kind of like you could probably set up something that aliases them so we have them all or something like that. But my bigger concern would be them getting stale. Things change pretty quick.
Yes. Staleness is certainly an issue, as it is for all of our Markdown files. I would say at the moment, these are less out of date than the average Markdown file you find in our code base. But that would mean something that we would want to pay attention to. The nice thing is you can actually have Copilot update them based on pull requests, which is pretty cool. I did want to say, as far as Claude goes, like the demo I was running uses Claude. So Claude is capable of reading the context files in from GitHub. I'm less familiar with Cursor, but I can do this with Gemini, OpenAI, O4, Copilot, Claude, all of them work. Because they all have the same VS Code integration.
That's what I was going to ask, Stephen L. Was your concern around the models being used or around the Copilot interface, the VS Code?
No, my only concern was that if we're going to have these context files, I would want them to at least work for, be picked up by whatever provider people choose to use. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out a good reason to not have these other than like clutter for people who don't care about them. But I can't really think of great arguments against it.
Where do they live, Mitch? I don't think we got to see that in the demo. Where are these files stored?
They live under the GitHub or .github.copilot folder. So the .github folder already exists. That's where we keep like our issue templates and dependabot config and things like that. So there's 2 new subfolders added. One is .copilot/domain knowledge. The other is prompts.
Okay. It's not a ton of clutter since it's a dot file, but at the same time, like if somebody was using JetBrains or like Cursor IDE, then, or what is it, Windsurf, then we want to not duplicate at the very least. I think what I'm hearing is that we do think it might be generally useful. I think one of the cool parts of this would be onboarding new contributors from the community quicker. But that goes to the generality point for what IDEs they have. I almost wonder if we shouldn't keep the context files in an Istio owned directory, and then have a sort of a make script that copies them to VS Code, where Copilot looks for it, where Cloud will look for it, et cetera, so that there's a single source of truth. And if folks want to add other integrations for different tools, that they can do so.
Seems like
certainly
Symlink might be an effective way to do that without having to just keep lots of copies.
That's fair. That's a good point. Yeah, assuming all the tooling will follow Symlinks, which I don't know why they wouldn't. But yeah, Symlink agreed. So yeah, I don't have any issues with it. I think it would be useful.
Okay.
I think Wiki might also be another place to consider. Like we have a lot of like useful like testing scripts that are somewhat out of date, and this seems like kind of in that wheelhouse. So just
Yeah, I did actually import the wiki into the domain knowledge for the most part. There's a more, like I did it with copy and paste, which sort of sucks. There's a more effective way to do it that seems to be locked down for CNCF projects. So I'm looking into why it's locked down and if it's possible for us to unlock that. But you can effectively, for a given repository, you can say, here's domain knowledge. Like we could point it to our docs repo, for instance, as domain knowledge, or to our wiki repo as domain knowledge. If we can get CNCF to sign off on it. And that doesn't change the code base at all. There's not a pull request. It's like GitHub org level settings. Anyways, I think I've gotten all the feedback I wanted on this. If there's other stuff you guys wanted to talk about, you should go for it.
I think we're at the end of the agenda. So you might just want to call it. Actually, I see Daniel here, so I might put him on the spot for a docs question when it comes to the release timeline. What do we have, like a go no go date for like documentation for new features? I know there's a couple things like multi-cluster, the inference extension, etc. What's the timeline / process for getting new docs and potential blog posts for those features before the release?
So we don't branch cut docs until .0 is ready for publishing.
Okay.
So pretty much the day you go to publish .0, the docs need to be there.
All right. What do we have a .0 date in the wiki? Do we know what we're shooting for?
I think it's August 8th. I haven't seen it presented at TOC, so I'm assuming it's August 8th.
Yeah, it's August 8th on the wiki.
Oh, okay. So .0 meaning the actual release date. Got it. Okay,
Yes.
that's I didn't connect that. Okay, great. That's super helpful. Thank you. All right. If that's everything, then we can give everybody 5 minutes. 5 minutes back. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.